Let's reform education about Africa through sewing and stories one video at a time. First of all, I would like to wish a happy Juneteenth to all my African American people, or according to Jessie Wu,
Black women's we's free and we ain't know it month. Black Women's Juneteenth month.
In observation of that, I'm going to tell you the story of an African man who was enslaved and freed named Ayuba Suleiman Diallo while we make a pillow using this purple Ankara fabric. You see, his story might have been one you have heard before if you've gotten the privilege of learning about African history. He's known as the black man who enslaved people too after being enslaved himself. But I don't believe that was supposed to be the message taken from this story. Anyways, it goes like this. Ayuba Suleiman Diallo was a Fulani man coming from what we now call Senegal. It used to be called Bundu before it unfortunately became part of the French colonization escapade. Ayuba Suleiman Diallo was of the Islamic faith and also worked as a religious guide, trader, and businessman. He became a Muslim scholar studying under his father, who was also a Muslim scholar. On one of his business trips, he was captured and sold into slavery. Now, Ayuba was so confused because his own family was into the slave trade themselves, so he didn't understand how he could be enslaved, as he had more in common with the enslavers than the people being enslaved. In the sense of his position, obviously not his skin color, he was very much a black man. While being captured, he actually tried to let the people know that he wasn't to be enslaved. They say he couldn't be helped in time, but I believe that the ship captains knew because they purposely shaved his head to make him look less of an aristocrat and more like a war prisoner. The ship sailed all the way to what was then Annapolis and now Maryland, and so Ayuba was enslaved. Obviously, this man was not used to this kind of life. He was from a wealthy family, a businessman, and highly educated. This was not his thing. Actually, he was even found unsuitable for field work by the enslavers and put in charge of the livestock. In 1731, he attempted to make an escape, and after being discovered, he had several court dates to explain why he would leave his enslavers' home. In that process, it was discovered that he was educated. A lawyer and Anglican priest named Thomas Blewett noticed his impeccable ability in writing Arabic. They realized that he was of the Islamic faith when he pronounced the words Allah and Muhammad, while also refusing a glass of wine. They would identify him as a Mahometan, meaning he was a Muslim. A translator who could speak Wolof was found. Wolof is a language spoken by the Lebu people and widely spoken in Senegal today. From the translator's translations, it was realized that he was of aristocratic blood. So from there, he was allowed to contact his father, and the letter reached the office of James Oglethorpe, who was the director of the Royal African Company. Once Oglethorpe heard his story, Oglethorpe actually bought Ayuba for £45. Usually, that's where we hear the story end, actually right before he was sold again. Because this is not a memoir, I'm going to briefly summarize the rest. He reached England, where Oglethorpe did not leave instructions for what will happen to Ayuba, and Ayuba found out he might be enslaved again. So he contacted Thomas Blewett, and Blewett agreed to accommodate him in the meantime. He continued practicing his belief, wrote the Quran 3 times from memory, and actually learned a lot about Christianity as well, as his acquaintances tried to convert him several times. He made the decision that he preferred his own faith, not because that's all he knew, but he actually studied aspects of the Christian faith, and he simply did not agree with all the Christian concepts and practices. In that, he actually made religious advisements based on the Bible to the Catholic Church about the use of human images in God's name. Ayuba Suleiman Diallo was a very educated man, and we know this. Thomas Blewett would actually go on to write his memoir for him. A scholar, a businessman, and an aristocrat. That's the end of my story, and I'm not sure what you want to take out of this, but I will say this. It's a shame that a lot of enslaved Africans didn't get the chance to be free because of their status in their home countries. You see, the reason they freed Ayuba was because he was an aristocrat. Those were the Africans that weren't to be touched. The rest, however, could be. Now, it's one thing to be enslaved by someone who looks like you, has the same culture, understands you to an extent. However, it's different when you're ripped away from your family, taken to a place you've never been before, put in dirty conditions, and treated like crap with no connection to home. And you can't even go back home because you don't have a recognizable faith, or you can't speak the language of your enslavers, or you can't read or write. In this case, you're an ordinary enslaved person and you deserve your condition. Classism, elitism, racism, so many isms that we can take from Ayuba's story. However, the main thing we should take from it is that it doesn't matter who you are and where you're from. If you are black, you are black. And so a level playing ground is not enough. An entire 180 needs to be done for history, culture, and the presence of black people everywhere to be acknowledged. This is why Juneteenth is important. What it stands for, what it means, and this is why African Americans celebrate it every year. I'm honored to witness a celebration of true freedom, because without the work of African Americans, my Black self would not be able to be here. I'll see you in the next one.